Hi, this is Duchess of Blades making a quick video to update the client regarding the progress of the work. Before going ahead, I just wanted to say thank you for giving me this opportunity. You know, I texted this and emailed this thanks to you before, but I just wanted to say it with my own voice. It's generous people like you who allow us to enjoy appreciating this art form. I really thank you for allowing that to happen. Just gonna go straight ahead. First thing you're gonna notice is that the kisaki is bigger than it was, and there is a specific reason for that. I'm gonna just show you. Alright, you can just look at my computer screen right now. The red square and the blue square, that represents the ratio between the width of the shinogi versus the ha. What I'm trying to say here is that at the yokote, you see a ratio of about 1 to 3, okay? That is just wrong, because I've never seen a blade that, well, actually, I have, but it's very rare, but that's not the problem. The problem is that, compared to the rest of the blade, you have the much more typical 1 to 2 shinogi to ha width ratio. So what I'm thinking happened with this blade is that at one point, it either never had a yokote, or it got destroyed. So it was repolished at least once before it got to me, but the previous polisher just sort of went willy-nilly and chose to use this as the yokote, you know, just arbitrarily, which is just wrong. The second problem is, if I were to put the yokote right here, alright, right where he has it, this is how much steel I would have to remove, okay? That's quite a bit. It's really bad for the sword, I think. But if I move the yokote down, I would remove a lot less steel, and that's much better for the sword. So let's review. This is how much steel I would remove if I kept it, and this is how much I would remove if I changed it. That is why the yokote has been changed. Other than that, the blade is just gorgeous. So it is very straight. That's the mune, and the hasaki is also extremely straight. The kisaki is pretty symmetrical on both sides. They do meet up, as you can see. There are some blades where you can see the yokote higher than the other, so this is not one of them. I did this to kind of show off. It's not going to be kept, obviously, but if you can see, the grind marks is diagonal. That's not traditional blade. The reason I did this is because, to me, in my eyes, if someone is able to put this type of grind on, where the angle of the grind is diagonal, that has to mean that the yokote is real. Because if there wasn't some sort of a geometric ledge, or, you know, sort of like the edge of a cliff, if there wasn't a real faceted side that defines the yokote, when you grind it diagonal, obviously, your grind is just going to carry on. Here, you can see that the grinding does not affect the other facets. This is going to sound really patronizing to you, because you, obviously, the collector, obviously know the difference between a real and a fake yokote, but I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same boat. The blade is symmetrical on both sides, and this is what I really love showing off. I took the time to really flatten this thing. If I move the reflections around, what you'll see is that it does not ripple that much. It does ripple. Unfortunately, I'm human. I'm not perfect. I'm not a machine. I'm a hobbyist, not professional. Having that said, even Daniel's Geo have some issues with this. Like 90% of the swords that are out there, the shape is wrong. It has dips and bumps, such that when you really look at it from a steep angle, the reflections will kind of undulate. It'll go up and down, like the surface of the sword. But because I took the time to flatten this to be as even as possible, that's why you can see that the reflections are really even. The niku is constant. Like, check that out. A lot of kisaki I've seen would be very bulgy and convex on one side and very flat and almost concave on the other. So this is pretty even. So that is geometry. I think that's really important. The tang, I put some rust on it because the original rust was very, very thin. It was very recent. Whenever that happens, touching it again and again, like you have to when you polish, is going to rub it off. So I actually have a time machine, and I put the tang of the blade into the time machine, and I sped it up. Now only the tang has rusted. Suffice to say, the only chemical I used was tap water. The rust actually looks even now, as opposed to before, where it was blotchy, but not like the nice Dalmatian blotchy, but the really random, not so good looking blotchy. The activities in the blade, unfortunately, it's actually worse than it was before, because before it was finished with Binsui and then with Hazuya. So the Hazuya is actually finer than the kaisei finish that is here. Also, it's not as pretty looking because I'm using diagonal grind marks. Ooh, that looks pretty good, as opposed to lengthwise marks. That obviously is going to get straightened out when polish finishes. So, I didn't foresee this before, and I don't think you're gonna back out. Not that I have any reason to believe you want to back out at all, but if you did, don't. Because now, the condition of the blade as it is now is actually worse than before. You know, I have to finish this, or it's gonna look like this, like rough everywhere. Having that said, the really ironic thing to me is that although the finish here is noticeably rougher than before, you can actually see everything better. And I think that is actually a psychological effect. Having that said, the boshi here actually looks a lot more obvious than before. Anyway, I think it's a psychological effect. What happens is, because there was so much rust and scratches and pits and nicks and warps, and, you know, I just wanted to, it's friggin' straight now, and it's so nice to look at, I swear, compared to before. Because all those things are gone, your eyes are going to actually want to psychologically look more carefully, and by doing so, you trick your brain into being more observant, I guess. You can even see the hamon on the mune. Not very clear now, but the blade's geometry has changed quite a bit. I had a lot of issues with this blade. This looks like a slightly kashi sori. Before I touched it, the sori on the mune and on the shinogi, it looked correct. They were consistent with each other, and the parabolicness looked correct. But the hasaki was just wrong. It was straight, and then it was really curved, and then it was straight again. So it's got this weird, really sharp towards the middle shape. And to make matters worse, I had to grind nicks that were here, and here with the fundari. What usually is supposed to happen with fundari is that this part is supposed to be either straight or very slightly convex. But the blade that I received, it was actually concave. It's a very common issue because this part just gets over-polished. I had to remove a lot of steel here and here, and it was already warped to begin with. The corrections I make would make it warp even more, but obviously I have to keep the Hasaki consistent with the Mune. So a lot of stuff was removed in the middle, unfortunately, but it's slight. But the overall effect you'll see is that the shinogi might be a little narrower in comparison to the Ha than before. It's something I really cannot deal with, because if you look at the tang, which obviously I didn't modify, the shinogi is wider on one end than the other. So this side is definitely wider than this side. Okay, this looks like the standard 1 to 2. This looks more like 2 to 3. So which side do I follow, right? Finally, it would have to have been moved up anyway. According to the article I've seen on the web, if let's say during a battle, this part of the kisaki just got broken off. The article says that the correct thing to do is not to change this chu kisaki into a code kisaki, because if that part just broke off, you would just make a line like that, right? That's the easiest way, but that's the wrong way. The correct thing to do is to move the yokote down and regrind this whole thing into a chu kisaki. You do not change a chu kisaki into a code kisaki. So that's sort of the same thing with this blade, because I have to remove almost a full millimeter of width up to remove the neck. I have to move the shinogi up as well, otherwise I would change the shinogi to ha width ratio. Overall, the whole thing does look more narrow than before, but I think this was justified, and quite honestly, I think it looks better, because this is supposed to be a boy's katana, not a boy's wakizashi, because it's pretty wide for a katana. It's very rare that you would see a full-length katana that's this wide. It's still too wide as it is, so I think narrowing it was not only inevitable, but good. To recap, the kisaki was enlarged, but I had to. It's symmetrical on both sides. There's a real yokote. The blade has been straightened on both the Mune and the Hasaki. The reflections on the blade... Sorry, I just love showing this off. The reflections on the blade surface shows a very flat surface. The texture of the surface is rougher than it was, but you're able to see everything better now because all the rust hitting and the scratches are gone. And finally, the shinogi has been moved up slightly, but it was again inevitable, and it honestly looked better. So last thing I want to say is I'm really sorry about the habaki, but thank you so much for being understanding. Thank you so much for being okay with the fact that the habaki I'm making you now is no longer a historic piece. But I think you're going to be much happier with a new habaki. The new habaki will actually be flush with both the Mune and the Hasaki, whereas before it was really just fat looking. Generally speaking, when you go to the museums in Japan, they would have the blade out with the habaki. So it's really important that the habaki is harmonious with the blade, which it will be. So what I'm trying to say is, on one hand, you lost historical value, but on the other, you'll just get a superior habaki. And it's not like I'm trying to con you into getting a cheaper habaki. I mean, we are replacing sterling silver foil with pure silver foil. So that was a mouthful. Let me know down below if there's any changes you think I can make before Thursday. Thanks for watching. I'm Duchess of Blades, and I'll see you on the next video.